What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to DoloresCannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops, specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London, as we're open every day.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Robert L. Snow, who served for 38 years at the Indianapolis Police Department, retiring in 2007 with the rank of captain. He has had over 100 articles and short stories published in such magazines as Playboy, Reader's Digest, The National Enquirer, and others. In addition, he has 15 books published. He joins me today to discuss his latest book, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. Robert L. Snow, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you for coming on as well. Really, thank you so much for coming on. This is a fascinating case of reincarnation. The proof behind it, it really is an immense story, and I know you've got so much to share with the audience in such little time, basically, as we have got together right now. Just before we do, obviously, prior to this event happening, which we're going to discuss in a minute, What would you? What was your kind of background? It was very much, you and your wife were both in the police department, building your careers up. You had done a number of great novels, which have just come in on the screen right now. And these novels had taken place during your time, served as a police officer as well. But there was no real talk of continuation of life or spirituality or consciousness, was there?
No, I was on the Indianapolis Police Department for 38 years. At the time this happened, I was a captain at the police department. And my whole career and most of my life, I had dealt with concrete physical facts, things you could pick up and show to people, things you could present in court and otherwise. I had never dealt with any otherworldly or spiritual or supernatural things in my life. Nothing had ever happened, nothing bizarre or unusual. I led a very grounded, down-to-earth life.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And going to a sort of a metaphysical bookshop is not something that would have been the first place that you would have ended up for a coffee.
No, unless I was on a case, I wouldn't have been there. No.
No, absolutely. And looking through some of your old books that you've done as well, they're really fascinating books that you've done.
Yeah, it's all about police work. I mean, I was a police officer for 38 years, and that's what I know, and that's so naturally that's what I write about. So I can write with some authority because I've been there and done that. So they basically all my books except for this one book were about various aspects of police work.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think by having that grounding behind you, the way you approach this particular case is from a completely different perspective as most people would?
Yeah, I think being a detective and helped me a lot because this investigation was very intense, complicated. It took me over 2 years to complete this investigation. So, I mean, it was a very intense, very complicated, very involved one. I don't know if a person who didn't have a background into investigative work could have got it done. I think maybe that's why I stumbled all this. I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And this experience. We're going to talk. I'm going to let you talk in a minute to discuss the story. Just a few short questions. This experience, when you went into regression to have this experience, it was just so real. Was it as real as we are talking now?
Yes, it was as real as anything. It was as real as life. When I was under the hypnotic regression, the things I could see were as vivid as real life. Didn't have a dream-like foggy quality to it or fuzzy. Everything was extremely sharp and clear. At the time, though, I didn't really think of this as anything. I thought it was just the hypnosis affecting my subconscious mind. I really didn't think at the time it was happening that was really anything supernatural or extraordinary. I thought it was just my subconscious mind bringing up old memories from this life and just kind of reorienting them to make a story.
Yeah, you see, some people, lots of people, I would say, who have had the experience that you've had, in the sense of going into regression to look into this aspect, would not have the clearness and clarity that you got through it. It makes you different in a sense. I think there's probably different ways to perceive this work, where sometimes it's just a knowing, it's like a download. Sometimes it's very foggy, but there's glimpses of things. But it's the clarity that you had it at. You are so lucky in one sense.
I didn't really realize at the time I had what's called a full sensory regression. I didn't know anything about regressive hypnosis at that time, but under my session, I could not only see and hear, I could feel, I could taste, I could smell, and I didn't realize it. It's actually fairly rare. I understand now that I've looked into this, but at the time I didn't realize it. I was just undergoing it, and at the time I thought it was kind of cool. I really did. I mean, it was like finding the most amazing ride at an amusement park. It's not real. I mean, you go to Disney World or some places, they have some amazing rides, and it looks real, and it feels real, but it's not. And that's what I thought this was at the time it was happening. I thought, this is really cool and amazing, but it's not real. It's something my mind has dreamed up, taken on my subconscious mind.
Well, maybe that's something to be pointed out here to other folks and myself, is that when you do this, if you approach it from the stance point that you did, where there's no projection or try not to conjure up what may happen, or what perceptions that you've had before, where, oh, I must have been a monk, or I must have been this, but going there with, well, whatever comes through, and nothing does, it's fine. Going there with that clarity, or that from that presence is the right way to approach this, maybe.
Well, actually, when I went into it, I didn't think anything would happen. I did this on a dare, and I didn't really want to do it, but I kind of got backed into it. I had been talking to a person who did believe in reincarnation, and I was kind of belittling it, putting it down so bad that she dared me to try it. And I eventually got backed into a corner where I had to try it. So my thought when I went into this is nothing's going to happen. I mean, nothing's going to happen. It's going to be a lot. They're going to, this person's going to try and tell me I see things and I don't. And I was really surprised when the things did happen. I started seeing things.
Yeah, absolutely. And just very, very another quick question before we start here getting into the story. Have you had that clarity sense? Have you been back to the same person, or has she passed? Or have you been back to someone else that's got the same gifts as the person you went to see?
During the investigation, I was trying to find out who this person was that I saw myself being. And I did go back to Dr. Griffith, the lady I went to originally, to see if I could get more information on this person. And she did take me back to 3 other past lives, which are, again, very, very clear. But they were so far back in history, they would not be verifiable. But every time she tried to take me to the life I was investigating, nothing would happen. She would try and instruct me, go to this life, but every time nothing would happen. And when I asked her afterwards, I said, why? She said, well, you already know everything you need to know. And which turned out to be true, but I didn't think so at the time.
Yes, yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that. Oh, actually, how has your family perceived what you've been through, what you've published, and what this is?
Not well. It didn't go well for the family. It didn't go well with the police department at all, needless to say. The command staff did not look upon this favorably, especially after the book came out. And I also did a couple television shows. It did not go well. People, I don't know, people just have a hard time seeing a police captain espousing this sort of thing. This is not the things that police captains talk about. They don't. They might believe in it. They don't go saying it publicly.
But you had to. There was a calling in you to really not to release this near your deathbed in a sense, but to really let this out now. And why was that?
Well, I tell you, a couple of times, because actually my agent warned me that this is probably going to damage my writing career too, because before this, all my books had been about police procedure. I wrote books on SWAT teams, on self-protection, on various types of homicide investigation, what have you. And my agent warned me that this would probably hurt me because I wouldn't be taken serious. And plus, my wife was very serious about me not doing this because she knew she was positive it would ruin my police career, which it did. And so she tried to talk me out of it. So several times I decided, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to send back the advance. I'm going to not do it. Every time I would do that, something really bizarre would happen. For example, let me give you an example. One time, my wife was really trying to talk me out of it, and I finally decided, okay, she's right. I was going to call my agent that day and tell him I'm canceling the contract. So before I called it, I got a call from the Berry Hill Art Gallery in New York that very morning. And a lady there, she was the researcher there. She said, I understand you're researching James Carroll Beckwith. And I had done some research on him to try and find out things about him. And I said, yeah, I am. And she said, well, good, I want to know if you know where his paintings are at because we're having an exhibition of his work. And interesting enough, the exhibition was going to open the same day my book was scheduled to come out. And neither one of us knew about each other. But more than that, Beckwith's work has never been popular or profitable or expensive. And I asked her, I said, why? Because the Berry Hill Gallery is a very upscale gallery in New York. And asked him, why would you do this? I mean, his work's never been very valuable. It's never sold well. And she said, I don't know. She says, a couple of years ago, someone just come up. We seemed like a good idea. And interesting enough, the show ran for 30 days. They didn't sell a single painting, not one. So, I mean, it's those kind of things would happen. A couple of times when I decided to cancel this book, something bizarre, something really strange happened. And it's like, maybe I need to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are so glad you have. I am so glad you have. And I bet the book continues to help a lot of people. So I'm going to sort of pass it over to you now, the torch, in a sense, because I know that really this is your story. And, let's go to that fateful night where you was having a drink and the conversation on past life regression comes about.
Well, I was at a party, and I was talking to a lady who's a psychologist, and I didn't realize that she'd used past life regression in her practice. Well, I had read a book called Coming Back by Dr. Raymond Moody. I've been a writer my whole life for how long as I've been a police officer, and to be a writer, you also have to be a reader. You just can't write; you have to read. You have to read in all different fields, because then you see how people handle certain subjects. Do they handle them well? They don't handle them well, and why? So I do a lot of reading. So anyway, I read this book by Dr. Moody, which was a book about past life regression. Dr. Moody had a friend who was a past life regressionist, and she talked him into being hypnotized, and she took him back to like 8 supposed past lives, and he talked about them in the book and everything. But it's funny, at the end of the book, he kind of hedged a bit and said, I don't know what this is. And maybe it's my imagination. And I kind of felt the same way. It sounded good, but it's mostly your imagination or just old subconscious memories. But anyway, so I was talking to this lady at the party, a psychologist, and I mentioned that I read this book. And she asked me what I thought about it. And I really kind of belittled reincarnation, the idea of past lives. And then, it was late in the party and had lots to drink, and so I was probably kind of obnoxious, to tell you the truth. And she was very nice about it and gracious and listened to me. And finally, basically dared me, said, well, if you think it's a silly, try it yourself. And at first I said, no, I ain't doing that. That's silly. But anyway, I came back in the corner. She said, Joe, you're scared, are you? And you don't want to ask a man, or if you're scared, of course you're not scared. So anyway, I eventually ended up agreeing to do it. But the next day, after you're a little more clear-headed, I said, I ain't doing this. It's stupid. But the problem is that night she'd given me the name, if you read on the card, the name of a colleague of hers who did past life regression. So I said, I'd run to this psychologist at the police department. I'd run to her a couple times a week. Now before this, I didn't run to her very often at all. But it seemed like after this, every twice or 3 times a week, there she'd be. And she'd always ask me, have you made the appointment yet? And I'd have some kind of feeble excuse. Yes, no, I was busy. I had 2 meetings and kind of stuff. So finally, it got to the point, geez, you see, oh, God, there she is again, and you're going to have some feeble excuse. So finally, I got tired of it, and I just made the appointment. I just said, I'll make it. But now I was kind of irritated. So I thought, what I'll do, I'll go there. I'm going to tape a tape recording along, though. I'm going to go to this thing. I'm going to cooperate 100% with this the psychologist, and I'm going to let her try and hypnotize me. And I'm going to tape record all and bring it back to this person and show her how stupid it all is. That doesn't work. And I showed you. See, here. Now, I did it. I cooperated. Absolutely nothing happened. Of course, I was wrong, and I was wrong in that aspect, needless to say.
So, okay, take us through to the part where you're being, Oh, by the way, as well. So, this regressionist, is she still around?
Yes, but she's retired now. She's retired.
Right. Okay. So, you were taken under, and describe, what you saw in this particular life that belongs to this gentleman that you now realize is potentially, would you say it's your past life?
Well, I saw myself, the regression part started, I was on a city street, but I could tell it wasn't from present time because there were horse-drawn carriages and gas lights. And I'm just walking along the street. Again, I'm still thinking this is some kind of mind trick. Cool, fun, but I didn't think it was anything serious. I'm walking along the street, and I tell the Dr. Griffith that I'm going to meet someone. And I see there's a very beautiful young woman I meet, and we walk down to a sidewalk cafe, and she asked what they order. And I said the woman ordered some kind of special water, and I ordered a glass of wine. Then, of course, Dr. Griffith always said, okay, now go 5 years forward. So I go 5 years forward, and I see myself in the hallway of an apartment building, and I'm having an argument with someone. I tell her it's my wife. And me and her are having a pretty good argument about something, and I just turn around and walk away. And I walk down the hallway to another room, and it's an artist studio. There are just dozens of paintings everywhere, all hanging all over the walls. And the right wall I'm walking in is solid windows, and there's a big skylight overhead. And I tell Dr. Griffith right then, the funny thing about this, by the way, when they're hypnotism, is I started saying things before I knew what I was going to say. I mean, usually you have a second or two to think what you're going to say. Under hypnotism, it would just come off my mouth before I knew what I was going to say. And I thought it kind of amazing because it's actually what almost wasn't me talking, it was the person's body I was in. And I told Dr. Griffith, I'm a painter. I paint portraits. I said, but I hate painting portraits. I really hate it, but I need the money. And I said that maybe 4 or 5 times to her. I hate it. I hate painting portraits, but I need the money. So then she said, okay, now go 5 years forward. I go to another scene where I'm at a party and people are congratulating me for something. I have no idea what they're congratulating me for, but the funny thing is I could feel that this person, the body I was in, was extremely happy. This was a very happy, I could feel his emotions, and I could feel it was a very, very happy time for him. He was very, very happy. So we went to another scene. I went to a garden. I was walking through a garden. I was all depressed. And she finally told me, she said, go to your death. She says, go to your death. So I go and I see myself dying, and I see myself passing up through this roof of this building. And you know, everybody's seen ghost stories on movies and television. You know what ghosts do. Of course they do that. I didn't think anything about it. But finally, I go over top of this building. It was nighttime. And it was over a huge city. This just lights for miles in all directions. So Dr. Griffiths told me, he said, go into the light. And each one of these sessions, when it'd be over, at the end, there'd be a real bright light above you. And if you go into the light afterwards, she said, go into the light. But that's the interesting part about hypnotism. People seem to think you're the controlled hypnotist. You're really not. All this stuff on stage thing is all make-believe, because I knew exactly where I was, what I was doing. But the funny part, she told me to go into the light. I didn't. I saw myself flying through some woods. And I could tell it was probably late fall. It looked like a very cold night. I could see the trees still had their leaves, so it was probably a late fall night. So next thing I see myself, I'm looking in the window on the second or third floor of this mansion, and it's a room. It's got a big fire department. There's nobody in the room, but I'm looking just painting over the fireplace. And I told her I wanted to look at one of my paintings one more time before I left the earth. And it's a still life picture of painting over the fireplace. So I went. Finally, after this, I went into the light. Then I had another past life regression that took way far back in ancient Greece. And so finally, Dr. Griffith, after that was over, Dr. Griffith said, okay, he said, go back to your most recent past life. He said, go back to the life you lived before you were Robert Snow. So I went back, and I could see that I was in the artist's body again. He was the same guy. But at this time, I was in my studio, and I was painting a portrait. Interesting enough, I was painting a portrait of a hunchback woman, which I thought was kind of interesting at the time. But the thing about the regression, it was so clear. I could see every brushstroke in that painting, every brushstroke. I could see I was just finishing up, putting the finishing touches on it, and I would just finish it. I could see every single brushstroke was that clear. So then we went through a couple more scenes in this life where I was in the garden. I heard my wife playing the piano and all. So finally, she said, Dr. Griffith told me, said, okay, go 5 years forward. So anyway, between the scenes, there'd be like a gray fog, and you really couldn't see much of anything. But during this time, she told me to go between scenes. All of a sudden, I blurred out. I didn't know I was going to say it. I just blurred out, she died of a blood clot. They said she died of a blood clot. Now, I had no idea who I was talking about. I just knew this woman was just incredibly important to this man. Because at the time, it was funny, because I almost felt like I wanted to cry. And I remember thinking how silly at the time it was, because I didn't know who this person was I was talking about. Just as a woman, I said, she died of a blood clot. Well, then, before I got to the next scene, the recorder I brought along clicked off, and opened my eyes, and that was over. That was it.
Incredible. And do you have an affinity with painting nowadays? I mean, have you ever tried it again?
No, I have no artistic talent at all. Zero.
No.
I was a summa cum laude graduate of college, and I did well in school, all through grade school, high school. I was a straight A student. The only time I ever got an F in any classwork ever was an art class. The teacher told me I had absolutely no talent. If I had any, I left it behind. It's all gone. But even Beckwith himself was not terribly. I mean, he was competent. He was very competent. He could make a good portrait, but he never painted anything what anybody consider a masterpiece. There's no paintings anybody would recognize. They're all most of them portraits, because that's where he made the money. But there's nothing. He had no. I guess he wasn't a Monet. He wasn't a Van Gogh. He was simply a competent portrait painter.
Right, this is Carroll Beckwith, and at the time you did not know that name.
I
you
didn't
just
know
knew
who it was.
No, you just knew the painting.
From the paintings, from the vision was the two paintings. I recognized as a still life. I knew the still life I saw, and the picture of the hunchback woman.
Yeah. Now, and when you went towards the light, what was that experience like?
It was like going to a gray fog. It used to be just like a gray fog where you really couldn't see anything. And it'd take 3 or 4 seconds when you come out. everything be blurry, and it'd take 3 or 4 seconds for everything to come clear. Then all
Did-
then it'd
do-
be like a screen like a TV or movie screen suddenly coming into focus.
Right, right. Did it have a very comforting feel to it? The light.
No, I didn't. I didn't really feel that. I really couldn't. I couldn't. You went in, and all of a sudden, like, everything was just gray over. Now, I know people. I know
Fair
people
enough.
have said that. I didn't really feel anything like that. I really didn't.
No, no. Okay. Well, an amazing experience. I mean, to just have the vividness. It's almost like, the afterlife in or your previous life in 4K. Compared to some people's experience. So, okay. So you came out of that experience. Now, you went on a trek then to try to figure out did this painting exist?
Well, I tell you what. Actually, at first, I just tried to put it on my mind. After I left, it kind of bothered me only because it was so clear. It wasn't like a dream. In dreams, things look fuzzy, and and your attention is always drawn to what the dream's about. In this case, it wasn't. Everything was clear, very, very clear. I could look around. I could, nothing was really drawing you. You could look around, do anything you wanted to do, and it bothered me because I was trying to figure out where this come from. Where did these memories come from? And I kept trying to tell myself, there's a rational explanation, Bob. This is just memories from your subconscious mind, because when you do hypnosis, you actually delve into a person's subconscious mind where all of your memories are. And I thought, this is just a past life, something you experienced in this life, and you just regurgitate it, reorder it. And I kept trying to tell myself that, but I couldn't shake the feel of reality. The scenes had such a feel of reality, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I think about it dozens of times every day, and it got to worry me because as a police officer, I saw a number of people who had obsessions. And believe me, if you have a really serious obsession, it seldom turns out good for you. And I knew I had to get rid of this. And I thought, I thought the best way to get rid of this, find one of those 2 paintings. I figured once I found them, then I'd say, oh yeah, that's where I saw them at. I saw them, 5 years ago at a mall or somewhere. They had a painting exhibition, and there was a little history of the artist underneath. I figured that would explain it. And you put it in your mind. You forgot it because basically the painting was so obscure and so mundane that you didn't think too much about it, so you forgot about it, but your subconscious mind didn't. And I figured that would explain it all. So I thought, what I need to do is find one of these 2 paintings. And so I thought, what I'll go to the Internet Public Library. One point, this was back in the early 1990s, so there was no internet then. It'd be a lot easier today to just put portrait hunchback woman in the search engine and find it. In the early 1990s, when you did research, you had to go to the library and pull books off the shelf and look. And so I went to the public library. I thought, again, how many portraits of hunchback women could there be? Come on. How common would that be? So I thought, this ought to give me a couple hours. I'll find it. It'll all come back to me, and then everything's explained. This is nothing otherworldly, nothing supernatural. This is just your own memories brought back. So, but anyway, I got to the Indianapolis Public Library. I found a very startling fact. They have hundreds of art books, and it took me months. It took me almost 3 months to go through every one.
Wow!
I didn't find a thing.
Well, what kept you going though? Going through all those books?
Because I've been a detective for a lot of years, and this looked like a really easy case, and I wasn't ready to give up and say, "Gee, I'm defeated." No, because I had something to work with. I had a piece of evidence I could work with. All I need to do is find the painting. So I went through every book in the Public Library. So finally, then I started visiting bookstores around Indianapolis. I figured, well, they'd have art books the library did. I started visiting all of them. It took me another month and a half. Didn't find a thing. So I started going to art dealers. Now, again, this is for the internet and for computers. And in those days, if you didn't have the name of a painting and where it was located, they couldn't do anything for you. And I described the painting to them, and then the art dealers, they never heard of it, never saw it, didn't know it. So what basically happened is it was about maybe 3.5, 4 month investigation. I finally had to give up. Let me tell you, I was in charge. I was in commander of the homicide branch for a long time, and when I was commander, we had over an 80% clearance rate, which is very extraordinary for a city our size. But that still means 20% of your cases go unsolved, and they go unsolved because you just don't have enough evidence, enough facts. And I figured that's what's going to happen in this case. I figured I'm just going to shelf this case because I couldn't think of anything else to do. I had done everything I could think as a detective to find these paintings, and so I basically was ready to just give up, just shelf the case and move on, try and move on with my life.
What did your colleagues think at that time? Had you told anyone about what you were up to at that time?
No one, not even my wife. No, the only one knew about this was me.
Oh, wow.
This is not something you want to share with people. Come on. I mean, particularly when you found, if after I thought I would do, there'd be a rational explanation, then you look kind of foolish. If you told everybody that you're investigating reincarnation, and it turns out, oh, yeah, I did see this painting in this life, you're going to end up looking kind of foolish. So I didn't tell anyone, even my wife. This was just between me. Just the only one involved was me. I didn't tell a soul.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So you'd given up. I think your wife came to you at some point to talk about the options for a holiday, and you guys discussed a holiday. And where did you end up going?
Yeah, we were actually coming. It was our anniversary, our wedding anniversary coming up, and she wanted to go somewhere, and she decided she wanted to go to New Orleans, which sounded like fun. I had never been to New Orleans. She had never been to New Orleans, and it sounded like fun. So we went to New Orleans, and the last day we were there, our plane didn't late in the evening, so we decided to spend the day kind of window shopping in the French Quarter. They have a lot of anybody who's been to New Orleans, they have a lot of really beautiful antique stores and memorabilia stores and all kind of really neat stores in the French Quarter. So we decided to go just window shopping that day in the French Quarter. Well, we got to a place called Royal Street in New Orleans, and in the early 1990s, Royal Street was all art galleries. And so we were just going through, and then they had some beautiful paintings in all these places. And so we were walking down the street, looking at the various paintings. So anyway, we got to I noticed as we walked down the street, these shops are getting smaller and the paintings more obscure. I mean, I recognize some of the artists in the big paint shop, painting big art galleries, but not some as we got further down the street. Finally, we got down to the end of the street, and it's kind of a small little art gallery, and walked in, it's 2-story, and it said modern art on the second floor. My wife likes modern art. I never have, so she went upstairs. Now I'm just walking along the first floor, just kind of looking. I didn't recognize any of the paintings, recognize any of the artists. They're all kind of mediocre type, paintings. Not terrible, but I mean, not something you want to pay a lot of money for either. So anyway, I'm walking down. I get to the corner, and there's a portrait standing on the easel, and I just walk by and glance. Then I stop like I run into a glass wall. I turn around. It's the portrait of the Hunchback Woman. Now, let me tell you, I was a police officer for 38 years, and I was involved in a lot of scary situations. I mean, you're hunting for people with guns, your people are coming at you with knives. And I've been to a lot of scary situations. But the difference being, in most situations in the police department, you have training and experience to depend on. You know what to do, what your best reaction is, what the people are going to do. So you know that you can depend on that. In this case, I had absolutely nothing, no experience, no training. What do you do? I mean, I didn't know what to do because I kept saying, at first I thought, no, this just looks like the painting. But funny, for several years after the regression, if I closed my eyes, I could still see every scene vividly clear. And this was just a few, like 5 or 6 months afterwards. So I closed my eyes and I could see myself painting this portrait. And I realized, no, this was it. This was the portrait. So I didn't know what to do. I tell you, I didn't know. I had no training, no experience. For a while, I even dabbled the idea maybe I wasn't really there. Maybe I was in a nursing home or I'd had a stroke. This is all a dream because things like this might happen on the X-Files, it might happen on TV and movies. They don't happen to people in real life. This is too big a coincidence.
I mean, it's incredible, to think that now you had seen the proof that you were waiting for all this time. You was in front of the painting, the same painting that would have been in the presence of your past life, potentially, and that you both have shared this same object. That's just that must have been an incredible feeling, and obviously, as you say, complete and utter shock.
I didn't know what to do. I really didn't. I'm standing there trying to think, well, I mean, what do you do on something like this? I mean, I had no experience to fall back on. I basically just kept staring at the painting, and I kept thinking, am I really here? Am I really in a hospital or a nursing home somewhere? This is just some kind of real vivid dream. You're laying somewhere in bed with the wires all run through you or something. But finally, one of the dealers in the art gallery had seen me stare at this painting for 4 or 5 minutes and probably thought, hot dog. So he comes over and says, "Say, I bet you're thinking how nice I'd look over your fireplace." Not really. I mean, a hunchback woman you don't know. I don't know. But anyway, so I asked him. I said, "What?" I said, "I don't recognize the artist. Who's the artist?" So he said, "Well, hang on. I got a little bio of him." So he walked over to the desk and come back with this little bio of the artist. It was James Carroll Beckwith. And I had never heard of James Carroll Beckwith. But the interesting part, I noticed he had maybe a paragraph, maybe 5 or 6 sentences, that it verified like 5 different things I'd seen during the regression. But then I kept telling myself, Bob, hang on. you've seen this painting somewhere in this life. There was probably a little bio of the artist below it, and that's where it all comes from. So I told the dealer, I said, I've seen this painting somewhere before. Has it, been in an exhibition or a museum? He said, no. He said, this has never been. He said, this has been a private collection for years. We bought it as part of the estate. But, even then I thought, no, there's got to be a rational explanation. I mean, it's an amazing coincidence that I found this in New Orleans, needless to say. But I could deal with that. But I simply could not deal with this being some otherworldly thing. I figured there had to be some rational explanation.
But this picture had not been on, rational as in the sense that you've seen it somewhere else.
Right.
Whether on TV or whether you've walked past it somewhere. But actually, this had been kept in a private collection for all those years, up to that point of being released in that art gallery.
Right. Somebody had died, and then they bought it. The art gallery said he bought it as a part of the estate. And he told me, well, I can let it go reasonably. I think they wanted like $5,000 for it then. Now, but I found one thing. Buying art is like buying a used car. It might say $5,000, but you can bargain what price you want. But at the time, a lot of people have asked me, says, why didn't you buy the painting? I didn't want to buy the painting because I figured I had seen this somewhere in this life, and I'd want to spend a couple $1,000s on the portrait of a hunchback woman, get home and realize, oh yeah, I saw this 6 years ago. Now I'm stuck with a $3,000 portrait of a hunchback woman. My wife would not have been happy about that, that's for sure. So what I did, though, I figured, okay, now I got information. I got the man's name, I got his date of birth, date of death. I can go back to Indianapolis, I can research him, then I'll remember where I saw this, where I saw information about him, and where I saw this. So I finally had enough information to reopen the case.
Okay, where is the picture now?
I have no idea. That was part of the problem. Once I started investigating this case and found there was some real significance to it, I went back to New Orleans to try and buy the painting. Unfortunately, when I got to the art gallery, it was closed. It was gone. It had been closed up. So just what all police do, I started canvassing the neighborhood. And I finally found the dealer who had bought the inventory from this art store, but the painting had been sold. So I told him at the time, I told the art dealer, look, I don't want to buy it. I just like a photograph of it or something, be able to prove it exists. And so what he did is he said, here, he gave me a little pre-printed form. He said, put your name, address, telephone number in this. I'll send it to the owner, and if the owner wants to, they'll contact you. Art dealers very religiously guard the identity of their customers for various reasons. Number one, you don't want to let people know what you have, lots of money worth of artwork in your house. Number two, you don't want other art dealers to know who your customers are because you want to sell them the stuff. But I never heard from the person. But so that was part of my problem, is I had to be able to prove that painting actually existed, and I was able to do that finally, to prove it actually existed. Through a lot of
and how did that come about to prove that it
what happened? I had to go along with the story here. Is that I went back to Indianapolis, and I thought, okay, I had the name, date of birth, and date of death, and I thought, I'll go back. So I went back to the library again in Indianapolis and do research on this James Carroll Beckwith. I found out there was hardly any information at all. When I got through of all the places I could find, he had listed maybe a half a page information. In the very large art books on artists, there'd be maybe one or two sentences about him. In the small books on art, there'd be nothing about him. Again, as a portraitist, he could paint a competent portrait, but he was not great. He was not a master. No masterpieces are done by him. He was not a great painter. He was a good painter, a competent painter, and so there's no real reason to remember him. So I couldn't find hardly any information. So I was talking to the librarian in Indianapolis trying to find more information about him, and she suggested that I go to the art museum library. We have an art museum in Northside Indianapolis. They have a much more extensive art history library. And so I went up to the art museum of Northside Indianapolis and went to their library and asked the lady for help. And she was able to find a little bit more, but not very much more at all. But one of the things I did find was a book on the famous American painter James Singer Sargent, a very famous American painter. Well, it turns out he and Beckwith were friends and had been roommates in Paris for 5 years. They both went to the same art school, and they shared an apartment for 5 years together. So anyway, this little anecdote about Sargent, and there was a footnote at the bottom that said, this came from the diaries of James Carroll Beckwith, kept at the National Academy of Design in New York City. And so I thought, well, this is what I need to do. I'll tell you what I was looking for at this time. At this time, I was looking for proof that reincarnation existed. I was doing the opposite. I wanted to find one or two things I had said during the regression that weren't true. In other words, because during the regression, Dr. Griffith asked me, he says, what did you regret about this life? And I would tell her, so I regretted that we didn't have children because my wife couldn't have children. And so I thought, well, good. If Beckwith has, this is not real memories. This is something gummed up. I saw him order a glass of wine. I thought, well, if he didn't drink wine, then this doesn't mean this is not true. If a woman very important to him didn't die of a blood clot, then these are not real memories. This is some kind of messed up thing. And that's because you just don't accept something like this, a concept like this, on this kind of information, on this kind of evidence. I wanted much more than this, and I was trying to prove it wrong. So what I did is I contacted the National Academy of Design in New York City, and I asked him, is it possible to view his diaries? And of course, they wrote back and said no. He said they're very fragile. He said, however, a couple of years ago, the Smithsonian had made photocopies of them that you could get a microfilm of the diaries through the Archives of American Art. And so I ordered the diaries. Again, I'm still looking to prove this wrong, not prove it true. I wanted to get. Let me tell you, like I said, I did a lot of years in police work, and I don't deal with otherworldly or supernatural things. We deal with concrete things. And I really wanted to get this out of my life. I wanted to settle this once and for all and go back to my old life.
Absolutely, and isn't it amazing he kept a diary, and that the Smithsonian actually were able to get hold of those type of assets and to actually keep them as well? Why would they have kept them if he wasn't a sort of well-known painter?
That's a good point, and I always wondered about myself till I got the diaries. James Carroll Beckwith was a real social butterfly. Back in the late 1800s, like 1900s, he knew everybody. Again, he was friends with James Singer Sargent. He was friends with American painter William Chase. He was friends with Claude Monet. He knew Sarah Bernhardt, the actress. Him and Theodore Roosevelt were buddies. They used to go to lunch together. When Theodore Roosevelt was the superintendent of police in New York City, they were lunch buddies. He was next door neighbors with Mark Twain. And so the thing is, his diaries are full of anecdotes about these famous people. Nobody gives a darn about Beckwith, but he has all kind of anecdotes about fame. Matter of fact, after I wrote my book, I had a lady contact me who was writing a biography on Mark Twain, and she wanted to know if there was anything in the diaries about Mark Twain that she could use in her book. And there was an interesting part. They both had summer homes up in the Catskills. They were next door neighbors up in the Catskills. They both had summer homes up there. And of course, Mark Twain was a drinking man, and so was Beckwith. But the village they lived in up there was a dry village. And Beckwith tells a story about during intermissions, like they go to thing, they scoot out the back door and run up to his house to get some whiskey, to drink some whiskey and come back. But basically, the point is, the reason they kept his diaries is not because of him. Nobody cared about him, but he has lots of anecdotes about famous people, little personal anecdotes. That's basically why they kept them. So anyway, I ordered the diaries, and I had a real shock when they came. Beckwith started his diary at age 19 and made his last entry the day before he died at age 65. There were 17,000 pages of diaries. Now I'm kind of stymied. What do I do now? Because you could keep the microfilm for 2 weeks, but that's not enough time. I mean, because 17,000 pages. Eventually, I end up having a hard copy made of it, and I end up reading every single page. It took me over a year. I read every single page of his diary. Now, in between the time I ordered the microfilm and the time I got it, I went through my tape again, the tape I'd made the regression, and I wrote down all the facts, everything I said that could be proved or disproved, dates, places, causes of death, what have you. And I found there were 28 things that could be proved or disproved in that diary. Again, I'm looking for the big disprover. What can I find something that disproves this regression? And so I started going through his diary looking for it. And instead, I kept finding one fact after another fact. For example, he did drink wine. Matter of fact, he was a very avid wine drinker because he had a lot of time he spent in France. His wife turned out it was October 24th, 1888, had a very serious miscarriage, and after that she couldn't have children. And he says in his diary a number of times how he regrets them not having children. He wished they could have had children, but his wife couldn't have children. And it went on and on. Instead of finding the big disproving fact I found, I kept finding one fact after another fact that verified. I kept checking off these 28, one after another. Interesting enough, I found it interesting enough in the diary, verbatim things I'd said to Dr. Griffith. I don't know how many times in the diary he says, I hate painting portraits. I really hate painting portraits, but I need the money. He was driven by the need for money. What's interesting enough, I'm not sure why, because actually, at the end of his life, he was pretty well off financially, but you would never think so. Listen to his diary. He was.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he made decent money painting, not huge money, but he made decent money. For example, his portraits, most he ever got for portrait was $1,000. James Singer Sargent had people lined up waiting for him to paint. He charged $25,000, and there's a difference. But anyway,
back in those days as well.
Yeah. But it would cost in those days in the late 1800s or so. It about $1,000 a year was your average income, and that's what he could live on one portrait a year. So they were doing fairly well. But you'd never think so. Listen to his diary. He cried constantly about needing money, and how much he hated painting portraits. But anyway, I kept finding one fact after another fact. But finally, when I got to the December 5th, 1886, I found out his mother, who he loved dearly, probably other than next to his wife, his mother was the most important person in his life because she was the only one who was a young man who encouraged his art career. His dad always told him that's the best. Being an artist, the best way he knew of starving to death. And his mother encouraged him and helped him and actually bought him his first paint. So he loved his mother dearly. Well, on December 5th, 1886, his mother's in church and had a stroke caused by a blood clot and died.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I think that was probably the thing that pushed me over. It's like, how could you know this? I mean, how could you know what a person's mother died of? That's not going to be recorded anywhere you know about. But also, I was more concerned, like I said, about the Hunchback Woman not being able to find it. How do I prove it existed? Well, 3 different places in his diary, in October 18th, November 23rd, and December 28th, 1912, he talks about painting the portrait of a Hunchback Woman. So like I said, that gave me some basis I could prove that actually that portrait did exist, because before this, only thing people have is just my word. But he actually mentions 3 different times in his diary about painting the portrait of a Hunchback Woman.
Incredible. I mean, you've got enough material about this chap to write a book on him. If there was an angle there, well, there is this angle, but of course you have done a book on this angle. But I mean, just on the guy's life. I mean, you've studied this guy so intensely.
Yeah. Well, again, I didn't mean to, but when you start a person's diary, you read 17,000 pages. There's not much left of this person's life you don't know about. There really isn't, because in your diary you mentioned about everything important to you happened to you every day. And he was a very avid diary keeper. He didn't miss very few entries.
No. Yeah. And diaries nowadays have more, for some younger people, have moved over to vlogging nowadays as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can understand. The need to do such a thing, because it's a way of releasing, isn't it, and expressing how you're feeling about what's happened, and that's what he was doing as well. I mean, this is just incredible. Okay, so the facts started to add up. Where did it take you then?
Well, actually, I ended up proving all 28. Now, anybody could make a guess. You could make a few guesses about somebody. For example, when I first started this, I kept trying to rationalize when I have something to write. For example, I told you when I was during the regression, after I saw myself die, I said it was probably late fall because he died in October 24th. Okay, that's a well. Yeah, but I tell myself, okay, a fourth people every year die in the fall. I mean, what does that mean? That's just a lucky guess. I told you I thought when I rose out of the top of the building, it was over a huge city. It was nighttime, a huge city. Well, he died in New York City. Then I kept telling myself, hey, a lot of people die in big cities. I kept trying to rationalize things to myself. Okay, that don't mean anything. A lot of people die in large cities. But when you get enough facts, you get 28. You can't say, gee, these are just 28 lucky guesses. It doesn't happen. The odds of that are just, there's probably not a number big enough to give the odds for making 28 right guesses about a person's life and not getting anything wrong.
No, of course not. Of course not. So where was the concept then for the book, in the sense? How did that come about?
Well, I had been a writer before this. All my books were about police procedure. I wrote books about self-protection, about SWAT teams. Sure,
but this was so different.
This was totally different. But I could see this. I could see this as a book, and I kind of felt like this was really important. I mean, this because not only was there was a lot of bizarre things happening in this case. Several times I had information my back would literally jumped in my lap. I mean, it just come out of nowhere. For example, in his diary several times he mentions working on his scrapbooks. I could not find out where his scrapbooks are at, because again, there's very little information about this man. Nobody really cared about him. The only reason he kept his diaries because he wrote about famous people. Nobody cared about Beckwith. And so I couldn't find where his diaries were at. Well, I was talking to an art dealer because when I was searching for the Hunchback Woman after I'd found the store was closed, I was searching for what had happened to the painting. I walked to an art dealer and described it to him. Well, he didn't know about it. He said, I have a person that works with me. She authenticates the work because apparently there's a lot of forgery in art. I didn't realize a lot of forgery, especially in American art. And so he said, why don't you call her? She's a real authority on American art. Maybe she'll know, where the Hunchback Woman painting's at. So I called her, and she had no idea the Hunchback Woman painting. But interesting enough, just out of the blue, didn't ask her anything. She said, his scrapbooks are at the New York Historical Society, don't you? Just this kind of thing. Again, hadn't asked. Didn't it just come out of the blue? They all said there they are. So I had to go to New York eventually to look at the scrapbooks too, to verify everything. Not that I thought there'd be anything new, but basically you couldn't let that big a piece of evidence go without looking at it before you made any kind of conclusions.
Do you know where, as an artist, he lived?
He lived in New York City most of his life. He was born in Missouri, and his dad, as a very young boy, his dad moved to Chicago. But in those days, right. This is the mid 1860s in Chicago. Those days was just a frontier town. It was not big. It was nothing like New York City type thing. It was
no.
So he left and went to Paris and stayed in Europe for 5 years, artwork. Well, he came back and he lived in Chicago for about a year. But after living in Paris and all, and he just really couldn't get used to the suffocating feel of Chicago because it was just a frontier town. So he moved back to New York City, and he lived most of the rest of his life in New York City.
Absolutely. Is there a grave for this chap? Is there a grave?
Yeah, it's a Kensico Cemetery. That was kind of interesting story also, because I read one of the books I read. It was called Who Was Who in American Art, and it said Beckwith, and it had his name, it had a sentence by him, and it said his death in 1917 was a suicide. And now I didn't see anything in my regression about that, and I thought, boy. Here's the clincher, isn't it? I didn't see anything about suicide. I'd seen him lay on a bed just dying. So anyway, I called the medical examiner in New York City. At this time, of course, I was the head of the homicide branch in Annapolis, and so there was not that, I didn't get caught between a lot of people. They put me directly through to the head medical examiner in New York City, and I basically told him that I'm doing some research on an old case, which was true, I suppose, a little exaggeration. And I said, I need to know what this man died of. He said, okay. So he looked and called me back next day and said he died of endocarditis, which is an infection of the heart valve. Basically, he had a heart attack and died. And he sent me a copy of the death certificate so I could see that. And that's how I found out that he was buried in Kensico Cemetery, which is in a suburb of Valhalla, New York. It's a suburb north of New York City.
Have you been to his cemetery?
Yeah, that was an interesting experience because I wanted to go to New York to look at his scrapbooks. I couldn't conclude a case like without looking at them. Although I had found everything, by that time I'd already verified all 28 facts. You couldn't conclude a case without looking at this because it was a very important piece of evidence. So there really wasn't nothing much new in the scrapbooks that I had already seen. But so anyway, when I was in New York City, that thought occurred to me how cool it'd be to visit your own grave. I thought. Because Kensico, again, it wasn't that far north New York City. But I found a really interesting thing. Apparently, you're not supposed to do this, and I have no idea why. I went to Kensico Cemetery, which is a beautiful, beautiful cemetery up in Valhalla, New York. And as I started approaching this grave, I got a real panic attack. Now, when I was a rookie officer in the police department, before you got used to things and had any kind of experience, I get panic attacks when you do anything really dangerous. You start sweating, your heart's beating. My left knee would just shake uncontrollably when I was a rookie. When you get something really scary, when I was walking close to the grave, my heart palpitated, I start sweating, and my left knee would start shaking. And I thought at the time how silly it was because if you believed in ghosts, there's no spirit in this grave. Whatever spirit he had's inside me. I could not figure out why.
Of course, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Whenever I approached this grave, I would get this terrible panic attack. And it only, you walk away from there, get maybe 25, 30 feet away from the grave, it'd stop. And I tried it several times. You walk past the grave, and I get a terrible, terrible panic attack. I have no idea why. People ask me why, and I don't know. I just know I could not approach this grave without having a terrible, terrible fit of anxiety.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That's incredible. It really is. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I know we're really getting close to the edge here with time. Just another quick question. Thank you for the amazing story that you're sharing with us. It really is such wonderful proof. What do you think you got from going back to that life by reviewing that life all these years later when you look back now? What do you think you were meant to get from that life? Not just maybe it was to go on this journey, but what needed healing? What needed healing from being forth from that life into this life?
You know, that was the really hard part about this whole investigation. It really wasn't accepting what I found. I mean, when I got 28 facts, okay, I had proven it. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part is accepting now I have to change my whole worldview. My whole worldview I've held my whole life is not right. That it's wrong. The universe operates on parameters I wasn't aware of. All these people I had kind of snickered at, rolled my eyes at all my life, they were right and I was wrong. And so I had to completely rethink my worldview as how the world operates. And that to me, it took a while. It took a while before I could really adjust to that.
And to challenge the people around you with that view, your closest loved ones.
Yes, yeah. Believe me, it didn't go well. It didn't go well. I love or the police department.
No, absolutely. But at least you stood your truth and everything else. I mean, you know, and you did this case with complete justice, and you know, a really a really good, you know, overall on this case. I mean, you've not left any stone unturned, and in your understanding then of consciousness, then I suppose it's really made you think outside the box. That, you know, potential, you know, that you are consciousness behind your eyes. Then
it did. It changed my whole view of things. For example, in law enforcement, and especially in homicide, sometimes you go to a murder scene and here's a teenager or even a pre-teenager cut down. They're dead. And you think, if you look at the old concept I'm thinking of, we only get one life, one chance, you think, what was the point? What was the point of this person's life? They're 15 years old. They haven't experienced anything. They've been cut down. You think, well, there was no point. But if you think of it in a reincarnation viewpoint, this is just one of dozens or hundreds of lives, it really makes more sense then. It really does. So, okay, this is just, you know, one hundredth of 1% of their existence. And it's, you know, and maybe there was a reason for this.
Maybe the reason was for the ripple effect that it makes to everyone that's surrounded by the case, not just the family, but people even like yourself that come across it.
Exactly.
Everyone that's touched by that one human being who's given his life away for, as some people say in this industry, you know, every death is a suicide.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it made it easier for me in homicide because you realize this person's life really didn't. Yeah, you're just moving on to another time. They're moving on to another life eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So we never did trace the picture. It's out there somewhere.
I have never heard from the person. No, not yet.
Do you own any artwork from this chap, Carol?
No. You know, and number, you know, there's several reasons. Number one is I am not want to spend a couple $1,000s on his artwork. Number two, I always thought if I owned his artwork, people would think, well, you're just writing this, promoting this to increase your value of your stuff. And I didn't want people to think I have an ulterior motive for writing this book or even for publicizing the book. They kind of want to increase the value of his paintings.
Where is his paintings now? The majority of them.
There's a number in museums. There's a number in various. Indianapolis, in matter of fact, Images of Art has 2 of his paintings. They're both portraits. There are a number of them in various museums. Because when I wrote the book, I got a number of paintings to include in it. And I had to write a number of museums around the United States. There are a number in museum collections, and there are a lot in private collections. Matter of fact, I did a talk in Hannibal, Missouri, where coincidentally Beckwith was born. He was born in Hannibal, Missouri, and they had a big festival there called the Steampunk Festival, where they asked me to come and give a talk since he's one of their residents, one of their famous people born in Hannibal. And there's a lady there who collects Beckwith paintings. I think she has like 17 or 18 of his paintings. And what she's wants to do is buy his home he was born in and turn into a Carroll Beckwith museum. Again, he's one of their favorite sons.
Wow.
Of course, he would.
Wow, that'd be.
Mark Twain was born there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that'd be incredible if she does do that. That would be just amazing.
Yeah.
But she knows of your story though.
Yes. Because I gave a talk at this Steampunk Festival about my book.
How did they receive your story?
Pretty well. It was
wow, that's good.
Pretty well attended. Did pretty well. I might just want to
Yeah.
add something for people. After I wrote the book, I went a TV program called Proof Positive called me and wanted to know if I'd appear on this TV program talking about my book. Well, the concept of this program is that they put claims like I've made to scientific investigation. So they basically asked me, would you be willing to take a lie detector test on national television about the contents of your book? Now, that was interesting because let me tell you something. As a police officer, I'd made a lot of people take lie detector tests, but I had never taken one. So I ended up taking not just one, I took two. I passed. I don't think they believed I could pass them. So I ended up taking 2 lie detector tests on this national television show to prove what I was saying in the book was true.
It's just incredible. This is one of the best stories I've heard so far. This really is. I've got to say that. You come across so sincerely. Which I know you're telling the truth, but I mean, I'm just saying, as your the way you're coming across is great. Because you've lived this. It's your truth. That's it. Where are you now? What's your career now?
I'm retired. I retired from the police. But after this book come out, like I said, I had been in charge of homicide quite a while, and we still had a fantastic homicide rate and clearance rate when I was there. But when this book came out, particularly after the Proof Positive television book came out, I was abruptly transferred down to the service desk, which is a place they put captains who are getting ready to retire, which was supposed to be the message I was supposed to get. Believe me, this did not go well for the command staff. This is not something police captains go public about. And the police department apparently did not think I ought to be there, and they basically tried to force me to retire after the book had come out.
That's such a shame that happened. I'm sorry about that, but everything happens for a reason, I suppose.
Well,
maybe
again, I thought the story was simply too important not to tell. And
of course.
Chips just fall where they may type thing.
Yeah.
And I eventually did retire because my career basically ended, right? But at the time this book and the TV programs came out, my career basically ended. So, you had to move on to something else.
What's the next book to come out? Would you ever cover any more consciousness subjects or reincarnation? What's next for you?
Actually, my agent was right about this book because it was over 5 years after the book came out before I could get a publisher to take another one of my books. Because again, I'm still writing about police work. I'm writing mostly true crime now, various true crime cases. But it was over 5 years. Before this, I was writing a book a year, and a couple of times I'm writing 2 books a year about police work. I had steady production of books. This book come out, I couldn't get anyone to accept my books. It took me 5 years. But like anything, enough time passes, people forget, people take you back. So after 5 years, I started getting more books published. And now now I'm writing true crime. I had thought one time about doing a study of other people's regressions. But the interesting enough you find is that most people's regressions weren't nearly as clear as mine, and they don't have nearly as proof. Because I collected dozens and dozens of cases, but very few. Matter of fact, I didn't find any that had something you could really definitely prove.
Okay, absolutely, and this is what I mentioned earlier on. There are some. Jim Tucker, who does children's past lives, he's proved quite a bit. There are others, but I just love your clarity, and I think that's so important. It's almost like the clarity of a child, in that sense, where it's just accepted, and that's what happened in that moment when you had that regression. It's fantastic. What would you say is the most important message of your work, then, Robert?
I don't know. Because it's funny because people a lot of times want to ask me about what's the philosophical or theological implications of what you've done. And there, I tell you the truth, I'm kind of stumped because my whole life has been police work and detective work, and that's basically what my job was in this. And I could fulfill that. I could do the job because it was a very intense, very complicated investigation. But that's where my training, my experience comes out. When it comes to philosophy and theology, I'm not really trained in that. I really have a hard because I've had a lot of people say, "Well, what does this all mean? What does this all mean in the structured universe?" And I tell them I don't really know. I tell you what I found. I can tell you what I did to what I investigated, what I found. The implications that's probably beyond my forte. I'm not really experienced or trained in philosophy or theology. I probably have to leave that to other people to decide. I can only tell people what I found. This is what I discovered. Now you have to decide what it all means.
Yeah, you make up the truth yourself from that. Absolutely. I thank you for that. Thank you so much. Okay, well, Robert Snow, it's been an eye-opener. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on The More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.